some of the more interesting coins featured in part 3 of the sale of the Misfits collection of US era coins. We are used to seeing mint errors on modern coins, but just to prove that this is hardly exclusively a modern phenomenon, here is a Flying Eagle cent coin struck about 25% off center, with the date unfortunately largely off flan, with only the 1 and a partial 8 being seen. But again, since this coin was only struck for 3 years between 1856 and 1858, that somewhat narrows the field by default. Graded by NGC with an uncirculated details grade, as the coin was unfortunately cleaned at some point, it all the same sold at auction for $6,600. Another fantastic era coin on offer was the 1827 capped bust dime, which was double struck with the second strike about 80% off center, and only the reverse details were double struck, with the obverse details merely becoming distended. This was because the new blank Planchet was fed into the press, effectively protecting the details of the obverse of the coin from being double struck as well. Graded by NGC as good 6 when its turn on the auction block came around. $7,200 was the final price for this coin. Now, we have a rather interesting mint error in the form of a no-date Liberty $half, struck widely off-center. In fact, about 70% off-center. But the really interesting thing is that there is an undefined indent on the reverse of the coin, likely the result of a retained planchet or a die cap from a previous coin in the same emission sequence. Authenticated by NGC with a grade of MS62, this conversation starter was sold at auction for $10,200. An off-center, off-metal, wrong planchet error Franklin $half coin is next, or well, stated more plainly, a Franklin $half coin struck on a penny planchet. Both the date and mint mark are unfortunately completely off flan, and the majority of Franklin's portrait, well, at least his face, is surprisingly well struck. The smaller planchet and the fact that this coin was struck about 30% off center leads to similar partial details seen on the reverse of the coin as well, where at least most of the Liberty Bell remains. Graded as MS66 by NGC, at auction it raised $10,200. Double struck coins come in many variations and usually appear on smaller coins where mistakes can easily be overlooked. In the case of this piece dollar coin, it was initially struck normally. Then it would manage to somehow become rotated 170 degrees counterclockwise within the collar die, and then received a second full strike, with elements of Liberty still seen underneath the date. Graded by NGC as AU55, this rare mint error was sold at auction for $11,100. Now, this is a lovely and very specific type of mint error called a Flipover double struck, specifically of a 1901 Barber dime. And based off of its condition, it seems likely that it had at least spent some time in circulation before making its way to the numismatic market. It happens quite simply when a coin is first struck normally, then fails to eject properly from the coining press, is then flipped over and struck a second time. In this case, widely off-center. The example was graded by NGC as XF45 and sold at auction for $11,400. And then we have this rather strange Eisenhower dollar coin struck 40% off center on a Jefferson nickel planchet. Now, usually, well, or at least most of the time, when we see a much larger sized coin struck on a significant smaller planchet, it would tend to be fed in along with the correct size planchet, meaning that it would inevitably be blank on at least one side. That is, however, not the case with this coin, which has crisp details of the Eisenhower dollar on both sides. Created by NGC as Proof 67 with delicate toning, it sold at auction for $12,000. Dual denomination error coins are always a peculiar rarity to behold, although admittedly perhaps not the best example of such a coin. This Franklin half-dollar coin struck over a Roosevelt dime. All the same qualifies for this classification, with the word dime seen just above Jefferson's head and at least a portion of the half-dollar seen just below the Liberty Bell. In theory, a 60-cent coin. Graded by NGC as AU55, this peculiar overstruck silver coin was sold at auction for $13,200. The world was a rapidly changing place in the mid-1960s, and for the US Mint, this is best illustrated by the switchover from silver to clad coins. Officially, production of silver coins stopped in 1964, and clad coins were made from 1965 onwards. Although 1964 dated silver coins were still being minted in 1965, a way to get rid of the existing silver stock planchets. And that is how this 1965 dated dime was accidentally minted on a silver planchet intended for the 1964 dated coins. This transitional error was graded by NGC as MS62, and at auction it sold for $14,400. Subscribe to WNN and consider watching another video about error coins next. For the World Numismatic News, I am Numisman saying thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.